Thank you guys for having me, and I love to come to Korea, so it's very fun always. I prepared this lecture because it is a little bit different to what I know engineers are working in this part of the world. Can you guys see the screen well? I think there's so much light. Light? Can you turn it on? Oh, yeah, that's better. Okay. So I decided to present some of the work that we do in Europe around mobility, particularly in TU Delft. I will talk a little bit about me, about my experiences, but also about the importance of being an interdisciplinary researcher, particularly when you're studying in a mobility school. Okay, so I cannot move this. Sorry. Okay. Okay, it's okay. Okay, so I have some quick facts about me. I'm a Colombian-Australian academic based in the Netherlands. For you guys that don't know where Colombia is that beautiful country here in the middle of the two oceans. And it looks like this all year. So it's very sunny and very beautiful. Then I had the chance to go to Australia where I studied my PhD. And this is where it looks Australia all year. It's not as fun as it looks, it's really hot. And then I live in the Netherlands. It looks like this. Very few days in the year. It's mostly rainy. As you can see, I have a lot of experience working across many different continents. And something that I really enjoy is most of my research is around human factors. And the reason for that is because I have a degree in engineering. So I studied engineering, operation research, but then I decided that being an engineer was not fun enough. And I went to study psychology in the Queensland University of Technology, where I graduated in human factors and safety science. So Nicole already mentioned some of the things about me, so I'm gonna start telling a story. So from 2014, I studied my PhD in the field of safety science and applied transport. And something that safety science does is the discipline dedicated to preventing harm. Not only physical harm, but also psychological harm. We study problems in order to create solutions. It's a very empirical discipline. We go and look at crashes. And then from crashes, we learn what went wrong and try to develop policy from it. In the case of transport, and this is very important for everyone working in transportation, safety science generally study what we call accidents, although that's not a very good term today. And it seeks to prevent this type of situations where two cars collide, maybe people get injured, and sometimes people die. Ooh, oh, better, thank you. Better. But something that I always like to remind is still nowadays, many people die every year. And we're talking about 1.2 million people killed on the roads. That's a lot of people. Indeed, it's the main cause of death in the world today. In addition to this, 50 million people are seriously injured, which means they need to go to a hospital. And that's a big problem because the health system is busy doing other things. And if people continue going to hospitals and producing this burden, we're going to have a lot of problems. So this is very important, and that's why we created this type of journals like Accident Analysis and Prevention. And during my visit, a lot of people asked me how to publish there. And the answer is, your papers should be about crashes. Accident Analysis and Prevention doesn't care about technology itself. It only cares about technology if it's useful on preventing road crashes, or understanding why they happen, okay? So this is a quick trick for everybody. If you're gonna publish in this journal, please always remember that it's a safety journal, so they care about preventing harm itself. Okay, let's continue. So I studied my PhD in human factors, which is basically trying to understand the ways humans contribute to these crashes, which are very negative events. Humans contribute to crashes in many different ways. By one side, they engage in behaviors that we consider risky. For example, they can decide to use the phone while driving. And that's called a distraction. So if they're distracted, they crash. But they also can prefer using transport modes that are more riskier than others. For example, they may decide to go on a scooter. Whilst it's not risky itself, it's risky relatively with using, for example, the bus, because public transport is always safer. So safety relates to all those decisions where humans the humans make in order to travel or mobilize, and those decisions eventually will convert into a safety outcome, like crashes. So during my PhD, I was told that studying human factors was not important because AVs were coming. This is something that my PhD advisor told me one day in a meeting and said like, perhaps you should not study that because robots are going to be here and we will not need humans anymore. By the way, that was in 2016. However, I am very not obedient with anyone. And I said, I'm not going to change now. I already wrote a systematic review and it was a year of work. I'm too deep into distraction. I'm going to continue doing that. One of the reasons why my supervisor at the time decided to do this was because of industry. This is a quote from Sergey Brin, which is a co-founder of Google, for example. He explicitly quote, "We expect self-driving cars to be a reality for ordinary people within 5 years." That was 2017, if you do the math. He said, additionally, AVs can dramatically improve safety on the roads by reducing human error-related accidents. However, that didn't happen. Have you guys seen AVs everywhere saving lives? I don't. So I did a good call because I became a really famous scholar because I was the only person working distraction. And I had the chance to influence policy. I work all over the world because AVs never came. So, but what we know today about AVs is that even this year, the World Economic Forum reported that even by 2035, only 4% of new cars will be autonomous vehicles. I know there is robotaxis and autonomous trucks are operating in some cities. In Europe, the first city will be London. But large-scale deployment of AVs will remain limited, even after 2035. There is many issues behind it. Some of them is technicals. They don't exist. They are not fully functioning. The other thing is regulatory. We don't have policy to support the mechanisms. Additionally, insurance has been a big issue that has not been solved. And there is a lot of cost challenges. Because in order for deployment in the way the technology is currently set up, we still need a big transformation infrastructure. And infrastructure costs money, lots of money. In Asia, we know that China is leading, I will say, the world in AVs. They have definitely started to bring autonomy-like features in everyday cars, all the ADAS and support systems. And there is very interesting and large trials happening in cities like Beijing. However, most systems will remain supervised and not fully autonomous in the whole of China, which is one of the most advanced places in the world. Driverless use is very narrow and confined to some selected roads and some conditions. And true large-scale autonomy is still a dream by the end of 2020, so 2030, not a reality. So, as someone that works in safety and also eventually end up working in autonomous vehicles, I've been wondering for many years this: did all the optimism actually slow down our progress on real safety? This is what I see every day in the news. As someone that did his PhD in distracted driving, an area that also my colleague Nicole works quite heavily, I read news all the time of how people are still dying. And this happens in the last 6 months. As you can see, I screenshot that today. Many crashes are still reported where drivers are being distracted. That hasn't stopped it. So I decided to do some research and see like, okay, but can we see some patterns in the way research has happened and where we start funding or not? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my own analysis. And this is what I found. So I decided to analyze the research that has been done in terms of behavioral risk. This is things like distraction, speeding, fatigue, sleepiness, and many other behaviors like this. And additionally, look at AB's research related to safety. The green line is related to AB's. So, as I mentioned, behavioral risk includes a lot of behaviors that are considered the fatal five, and the green line includes autonomous vehicles research, looking at traffic safety impacts itself. This is the pattern that I found. You can see it very easily. Until 2020, behavioral risk and AV safety research were very close to each other. However, after the industry went public and decided to mention that 5 years we will have autonomous vehicles, there was a complete shift in funding. And this is research publications specifically. Most of the work happening in the field was converted to autonomous vehicles. So people stopped studying behavior. Everyone stopped studying autonomous vehicles in some way or the other. I'm going to ask a question for everybody. Raise your hand if shifting focus from human risk to AVs felt irresponsible to you. You cannot participate, Nicole. Yeah, but you were going to say something? Did you raise your hand? You are considering it. Any reactions to this? I also wonder, have researchers used the time wisely? So I studied my PhD in a place called KAIST. KAIST had 60 academics dedicated to study road safety. It was the top center in the world in behavioral research, particularly around accidents. The center was officially closed today because it was not funded. Most of the funding in the area of ABs has been going to autonomous vehicle research. But the problem is, governments cannot fund a dream forever. And in the same that happened in Europe, autonomous vehicle research is not being funded anymore by the governments. And the reason is because people are still dying. 1.6 million of people die. We need to do research that actually has impact on people. And that's something that I wanted to ask you to imagine for a second. If autonomous vehicles did not exist, would you be doing other type of research? Would you be focusing in other problems, in things that actually kill people, you know? Like, for example, the elderly. Would you be trying to make the world safer for them? For example, youth. Would you be trying to educate them on making better choices about transport? The problem that happened, and that I am increasingly researching, is what was the impact of all the promise that was not delivered? What is the impact of listening to industry and technology without really thinking what the society needs? Okay, let's move on to the next topic. So what I want you to think today is about what do we owe society as researchers, because we have a big responsibility. The things we're researching on is the things that will mark conversations across the world. I want us to think more about what are the benefits of these intelligent transport systems, who suffers the risk and need to adapt to them, and what does it mean to be a responsible researcher. So to do that, I always look at ethics. And by the way, there is nothing mystical about the word ethics, and I think this is a mistake to think that it's something very difficult and foreign. Safety is an ethical issue, because ethics relate about harm, who is harmed and who is not. That's basically a question of ethics. So safety itself is an ethical point. But then when you look at ethics and the way it's treated, particularly by some of my colleagues from philosophy, is they look at it mostly as an issue of dilemmas. You know, like, you have this car, so who should the car kill, 4 or 1? And then they think that that's ethics and see it is. And the answer is, it actually is not, because ethics is actually about the choices that we do. Many people decided to study autonomous vehicles, even though that many don't believe that was going to happen, because it's where the funding was going. Very few people that actually end up being very lucky, build careers with that, decided to continue doing the human factors research. Because they realized, like, well, this may happen, may not. I will concentrate on the topics that still are important and will be relevant for years. But then I want you to think about ethics or safety or any other thing that you consider as not just a theoretical scenario. It's real choices that we do in our research and our work, and as a practitioners as well of transport. So let's talk about AI, because these days the new trendy thing is artificial intelligence. So AI is, of course, being integrated into transport systems faster than our ability to fully understand and govern its impacts. And this is something that, as a researcher that already saw everybody working on autonomous vehicles, worry a lot. That we're giving too much value to technology and very little to the system itself. There is another issue. I think everyone is using the word AI wrong, because now everything is called AI. I've seen neural networks from the 90s called AI as well. So we need to be very careful about what AI is. But I want to specifically talk about a technology that I have been thinking a lot, and I know it's a big concern as well in Europe, which is the language models infrastructure. So a lot of people ask me, why do you think it's so important, language models? And I like to tell them that language models are particularly complex because before in the world, we humans only interact with systems through physical contact. So if you wanted to enter a building, you need to be present and the things open automatically and then you enter. If you wanted to operate a car, you need to touch something, you need to start buttons. But the problem is we basically have automated language. And interactive language is a bit more complex from a psychological perspective because language relates a lot to our cognition, our beliefs. And our cognition and beliefs determine my behavior. So I've been really careful about it. Some people see language models as infrastructure, and I think it is infrastructure. Language becomes infrastructure because you can use language models to interact with policy. Have you ever asked a language model if something is legal or illegal? Many people do. They say, can I use my phone while cycling in Korea? You can ask language models if it's healthy to eat something. You can ask language models what is the best restaurant in Daejeon, for instance, you know? And it gives you something. You don't need to read the policy anymore. You can just ask a question directly. That means that we created a new way of interaction. And that means that we will be communicating with policy, with data, with people and other users. And then language becomes really important because it will influence decision making. It can bias you. It presents information in orders that we still don't know how it works. And there is a lot of issues around that. So that's what I think language is so important. But let's look at a couple of examples that I think is relevant. Something to consider is now that AI becomes more embedded in transport, we must ask, what kind of things are we outsourcing? Because before, if you need to make a decision about doing something or not, you probably Google it, then find a web page, then went and read, and then you make your decision. Now we don't do that. Now we ask for, give me the answer. So our amount of time thinking has been reduced significantly. That has other implications for human factors, but let's just talk about transport. I'm going to show an example here, which is a collaboration with Nicole and KAIST, so you guys know the type of research we do. So researchers are trying to find many applications for these LMLs, and this is something that we did and Nicole led as well, which is let's simulate the reasoning. So basically, can these language models be smarter in terms of making decisions compared to the way we program before autonomous vehicles? Something that I want to remember everyone is they're not smarter, they're just trained in text, and we still don't know what text is the one that being trained. It's also stochastic, means that it cannot give the same answer all the time. And we still don't know how it weights values, because there is, of course, some decisions on the programmers about safety and fairness. So we do this study where we give some scenarios to the language model and ask the language model to pretend to be an autonomous car, and we found some of these results. So basically, the language model was very happy to give some solutions to it. So for example, if they see you jaywalking, which is crossing the middle of the road, it was less likely to protect you. So basically, the language model say, okay, since a pedestrian is crossing where it shouldn't, perhaps he deserves to be hit by the car. If there is children, it's like, you know, children are younger than elderly. We can kill a couple of elderly if we can save a child, you know. And this is a very interesting thing to do, because it's so terrible to imagine that an algorithm that was designed by some engineer that we don't know is deciding if my family members or friends live or die. And we found that, of course, language models can mimic this human moral trade-off. They can decide to save more lives, protect children, punish jaywalkers. But the question that I have for everyone is, should we let them to do that? Do we want language models to decide who dies or lives? Raise your hand if you think they should decide. Okay, raise your hand if you think they shouldn't decide, just to confirm it. Okay, I see a little bit more of half hand there, but that's better. So I think we can agree that we don't want to be chosen by an algorithm, at least. And I love that, because that also brings some of the issues. If we give moral reasoning to machines, we're also transferring responsibility. And responsibility is one of the topics of research. Indeed, my official title at TU Delft is I'm Professor of Responsible Risk Management, which is looking who is responsible of when the things go wrong. And the issue of responsibility has a lot of implications, because it also means that based on who is responsible, we can deliver interventions in the system. So who then is accountable when things go wrong? So in this case, and this is bad news for all the engineers, the obvious answer will be the engineers itself. You know? If you are designing a system that will want to make decisions about who dies or lives, you also have the life of people on your hands. So now, more than ever, it's becoming more important to be aware of these moral dilemmas and how they are distributed and what it means for you and all. Okay, I have a question. Raise your hand. Who is working in large language models right now? One. You're in everything. Two, three. Who else? No one else? Who is working in AI? Raise your hand. Who is working with AI? A bit more. You guys are so shy, like higher. I'm blind, so good. So I think these questions actually relates to you. And I don't have the time to give a whole class of lecture on ethics of new technologies, because I was only invited for today to do this. But I think I recommend you to think about it, because there is a lot of work that talks about values and technologies. And if you are working with that, you will be held accountable and responsible for that. You know, and that's what we expect of modern engineers in the world. At least in international journals of the type of research and funding that happens in Europe, we want to see responsibility. Yes, you can do research on this, but you need to understand the implications that we have for people. Okay, anyone has a question? We can stop here for a little bit, if there is questions. No? Feel free to always raise your hand and ask questions. I like the interaction as well. Okay, so I just show you why it's important to be aware of the implication of technology. But I also want to give you a solution to it, because the first part was a bit dark. So there are ways to think about technology that can help us to to be more responsible. One of those ones is to look at justice. Justice is a concept that we can use to not just be a judge and a lawyer and trying to find justice. No, it's a concept that we can use for design. So while responsibility highlights who is accountable for decisions, justice shifts this focus towards how the impact of those decisions are distributed. So there is this theory that was developed by a Dutch-Israeli researcher called Martens. And he says that when we design transport systems specifically, and this is transport justice theory, there is 3 principles that we should consider. And he argues for these principles. I'm not going to argue for those principles now, but I will tell you what they are. He says that the first one is equality, that all users should have equal value. That makes reasonably sense. You know, just because I am a pedestrian doesn't mean that my value is less than someone that has a beautiful car. Just because my car is quite cheap doesn't mean that the one guy with an expensive car has more value than me. As a road users, we all should have the same value. The next thing that it highlights about fairness, risks and burdens should not be concentrated. Groups of people should not suffer more than others. And the problem is there is always suffering because there is always risk everywhere on the roads. We all know the concept of vulnerable road users. We should not have vulnerable road users. The concept is not a label, it's also a jail. They should not be vulnerable in the sense that we are in a modern society, we should find ways for them not to die higher rates than a car driver. And I think that's a problem with the term, that it becomes now a mantra. There is even a journal of vulnerable road users. They should not exist. Vulnerability is our goal to eliminate. The third concept is about accessibility. Everyone must have real usable access to transportation because transportation is very important for everyone's lives. You guys come to a school for that, people go to hospitals, you meet your families. Transportation is important in all cases. So as you can see, there is nothing magical and mystical about these principles. They can be common sense. And this is what we call transport justice theory. Now, the challenge is how can we use these principles as part of the transport system? How can we translate these principles into real interactions on the road, into safety, into action? I've done some work about it in recent years, of course, with the support of PhD students and some of my colleagues as well, more experts in technology and justice as well. We have been spending time talking to road users, developing questionnaires, doing talks with experts, proposing theoretical frameworks. And if you're interested in this, I recommend you to read some of these papers. And if you're working in autonomous vehicles, please read these papers because this is something as well that you are potentially impacting. Okay, so the first thing is about fairness, and I'm going to make a little summary of what I found in my research in this topic. So as I say, fairness relates to I will return to it, let's analyze about the risks and burdens should not be concentrated. So what I found in fairness is that vulnerable road users are expected to adapt to AVs, not the way around. There is also unequal risk. AVs design often protects some while exposing others. For example, there was a time, and I think it's a little bit fixed now, where autonomous vehicles were able to detect pedestrians because they were slowly very predictable. But there was a lot of crashes about cyclists. So that was a case. There was a technology that was very good detecting one group, but not others. There is also a space conflict. AVs get priority lines, and others may lose access. An example of this is a policy in the US that was started by the Biden administration, which give beacons. Beacons are signals, like things that can be detected by radars. So they were investing 1.2 trillion, which is a lot of money, on developing technology that will require you as cyclists or pedestrians, and basically everyone, because Believe it or not, everyone is a pedestrian. There is no such a thing as a driver and a pedestrian. We all are pedestrians. Happen that some people have a car too, you know? But it was that when you are a pedestrian, you need to wear this beacon in order for you to be visible for the autonomous car. Oh, this is another example of this. There was another development, and this is a patent from Ford, where they developed this app to warn pedestrians and cyclists the autonomous vehicles. I found this to be very interesting because, as I highlighted, vulnerable road users are already vulnerable, right? They already die more often. That's why we call them that way. But then the industry also expects them that if they want to be safe, they need to do something else. So if you want to be safe, you need to bring your beacon. If you don't bring your beacon, good luck. Or if you want to be safe, you must have a mobile phone with battery. So the phone can tell you, this car may not stop. Good luck. Isn't that funny? And sad at the same time? I found it to be the opposite of what we should be doing. And that's the problem with the industry. The industry only wants to push things without being responsible on the issues. I'm glad that there is a lot of colleagues and researchers have seen this, that every time you send a paper like this to a journal, they will reject it on the basis of being immoral. Like, why would you even try to make more work for the road users that are already more affected? Let's look at equality. Equality is about, do you remember what I said? Should bring the table early. All users have equal value. Let's come back to it. So the first question of equality is who counts? And as I mentioned, systems often fail to detect or prioritize non-drivers. There is also technology bias. Design assumes users are predictable, connected, and visible, but most likely than not, particularly in low and middle income countries and many, many countries in Asia, users will not be collected or visible. And also equality relies a lot about whose safety matters. So at the moment, we have an inequality problem in the network because there is vulnerable road users. If there was no such a thing, we will not have equality problems. And the equality is because if a car crashes with a pedestrian, the person most likely to die is the pedestrian, not the car driver. I think that's the whole logic. But then there has been some proposals from engineers that dedicated lanes for autonomous vehicles are coming. Why we don't have a dedicated lane for cyclists, but we can have one for autonomous vehicles? Have we forgotten that we're in a climate crisis as well, that we need more sustainable mobility instead? Let's look at accessibility as well. We all should have equal access to transportation and mobility systems. So who is this cars designed for? At the moment, they're designed, some of the things that the industry said when they publicly say, oh, we have this beautiful technology, it's going to make the life easier for the disabled, elderly, and low-tech users, often excluded. You know how expensive are these cars? Do you think the disabled can afford it? They already have to pay a lot with the medical bills to add it. Tools like beacon create barriers. You need a phone in order to be safe. Another issue that I have identified quite often is when we do design of autonomous systems, and with all due respect, people doing research on this, you only invite car drivers to test your technology. You never invite anyone else besides that. That means that there is a lack of voices on the evidence development, but also in policy processes to be involved in this. Because we think that autonomous vehicles is just a matter of car drivers. But it's not. It's a matter of everyone. Because we all are pedestrians. We all will share roads with them. Okay. I did some research about acceptability of the technology, and I want to show you this because it's some of the results. So we were asking people if they have positive, neutral, or negative perceptions about autonomous vehicles. And some of the perceptions that we consider were usefulness, affordability, usability, and effectiveness. We asked to drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. As you can see, and not surprising, drivers were very positive about autonomous vehicles. Drivers and pedestrians. So, they're quite useful because, of course, you don't need to drive anymore. So they are taking some task that I have to do. Pedestrians also thought they were useful because they think that usually car drivers are really aggressive. And I've seen it here in Korea because you need to run a lot when you cross the light sometimes. So certainly for them it's useful that at least a human is not trying to kill them. But cyclists were not so optimistic about it. The things get a bit worse when you ask about things like affordability. As you can see, pedestrians and cyclists think they are really expensive. Because, of course, they probably cannot afford a car like that, which means it violates the principle of equal access. Effectiveness is also in doubt for pedestrians and cyclists. And it's very funny how they are neutral about it, but it's very clearly that if you're a cyclist or a pedestrian, the thing is not going to protect you as well as this. And I want you to see this difference in perceptions because clearly shows that we are asking questions to some groups. That's why I don't like studies of technology acceptance that only consider one group of people. Because the interesting thing is when you bring different road users, a multi-actor situation, that's where you can see that there is big differences in inclusivity on this. I also like to do qualitative research. And the reason why I like to do qualitative research is because I try to extract the voice of people. We often don't want to hear some groups of people, so I'm like, okay, let's do interviews. This is some of the comments that we find from road users. So drivers and AV passengers are generally more positive and focus on performance and efficiency. So they certainly care more about, okay, it's easier to drive, or, oh, I can work while being in the car, etc. So for them, it's time saving. But then if you ask cyclists, this is what they say. I'm not so sure I can trust the system that doesn't really see me. And the reason is, it is very evident that cyclists is a big problem for vulnerable road, for these autonomous vehicles. And there is this separation, I'm not a car and I move differently. Certainly there is this idea that is only designed to accommodate for one type of road user. If we look pedestrians, this is also a 53-woman-old pedestrian. She said, fully automated, I couldn't find them useful at all. I know that there is always a system failure, and this is true, machines fail, and they will fail. And I don't think the automated vehicle is smarter than a car with the driver. This is something that she mentioned as well. So I was trying to also use research to develop policy. And with my student, Laura, we decided to interview experts in the field and trying to develop policies in order to make it better, more just and safer, the introduction of these vehicles. This is what we found, and I want you to think about it for a second. What we found is, if you want to implement autonomous vehicles, there is two types of policies, one that are received as very positive by many road users. This is a group of different users, and very negative. So usually policies that are considered to be positive relate to improved standards for detection of vulnerable road users. People really want the car to be standardized, particularly the sensors. They want that all cars should have sensors able to detect pedestrians and cyclists. That's all what they want. They also want priority for pedestrians and cyclists. A car should never go on top of a cyclist or pedestrian. They should always give priority to pedestrians and cyclists. There's a minimum principle of safety that people are saying, particularly at crosses and intersections. That's where the point becomes more interesting. Some of the negative policies that have been implemented is fines and penalties for blocking AVs or public transport are seen as punishments, and they should not be allowed. And this is happening already. Some countries, like Singapore, have already legislated that if you are stopping autonomous vehicles, you will receive a penalty. I think it's around 200 euros. They also disagree with sharing lanes between autonomous vehicles and buses. there is concerns about safety and practicality because they think they will slow down buses. And I also agree. Buses are the safest, are most sustainable way of transportation. I mentioned that at the beginning of the talk. We want more people in them, not outside them. So I also think it's very environmentally friendly. And something that people say is, who is going to pay for it? Because infrastructural change in order to accommodate for these cars is expensive. People are not willing to get taxed more for just a few groups that can afford these vehicles to be able to drive them. Okay, so I prepare an activity as usual because I like you guys to think about what this means. So I have this question for you, and I want you to probably work with the people besides you or by yourself, do whatever you want, but let's have a discussion here. And the question that I have is, if you had to redesign this street, what would justice look like to you? I went to lunch today, and I saw this here in the Chun. I spent some time thinking about it, and then we talk. I'll give you 5 minutes, I think, will be good. Okay? Okay, let's just start with some discussion about it and reflect about the concepts of justice and what I mean. Who wants to start?
I can do it.
Thank you so much.
I have one minor question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether the roadside near the cyclist is for pedestrian. Is this roadside for the pedestrian?
Yeah, this is it's the same road as here in the Chun, so that's the same thing. It's just that this is for the pedestrians and
cyclists.
yeah, in that corner there besides the trees, yeah. So these are the same trees.
Okay, so
Yeah.
from my understanding, I think everyone here have the usable access to the road, but the equality is not as good because although everyone can access the road, I think they are not equal for different users. For example, if you are a driver, you can feel that you can drive freely in this wide road, but as a pedestrian and cyclist, you can only walk on this narrow road. And about the safety, I should think that although the vulnerable road user is protected because they are separated from the vehicle, but on this narrow roads, the pedestrian and cyclists, they may have some conflicts, they may clash with each other. So, from my understanding, the acceptability is good, but the equality and fairness is not that good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to congratulate you because you actually raised a point that I didn't mention, but it's very important. When we talk about safety outcomes, generally most of the people imagine number of crashes, number of injuries. I don't know if this is what you wanted to say, but you use the word feeling. Safety is also about perceptions. And I think when you say, this looks very comfortable to drive, this looks very uncomfortable to walk, that's also a bad outcome. You can design systems that are objectively safe, but psychologically unsafe. And we don't want road users to feel stressed and uncomfortable in the road. We want them to make the road as comfortable as possible. So that's a very interesting point that I didn't mention because perhaps in travel behavior classes is more useful, but there is also psychological perception here, and thank you for raising that. That was very interesting. The other thing that you notice, and that's correct, there is a separation between the road and the other road users. And technically, I think that's correct. That's what the engineers do, right? They think like there is the cars and the others. But there is two issues as well that you raise, which is there is pedestrians and a lot of elderly people, and there is the cyclists. But they are not the same. There is also a risk situation here because cyclists can go faster, and there is a different level of vulnerability. So this also highlights the importance of making a stratified analysis of risk. It's not the same the relative risk between the pedestrian and the cyclist. as well as there's not the same the risk between cyclists and pedestrians versus the car drivers. So there is different levels of risk here. So thank you for noting that. That's a very smart point of analysis. Next. This is good, yeah.
Okay, I think for the equality principle, I think the professor mentioned is very right, because the rights for the motorized vehicle and the vulnerable road users are not equal. But I also noted that the accessibility principle, I think this road doesn't have any non-barrier facilities for the blind or the disabled people. So I think it didn't obey the accessibility principle that everyone must have the usable access.
Thank you so much. Yes, we know that the roads for particularly visually impaired people should also have feedback in the surface so they can be clean. This is not here available. So even among the vulnerable, there is different levels of vulnerability. So it still is not conforming to the standard of the road. I don't know what the manual in Korean design says, but that's a very good observation as well. Thank you. Next. Has somebody thought something different? Or no, you can also disagree. We can discuss that too.
So actually, I think I really need to discuss those kind of situations under different kinds of traffic situation. I think. So I think for example, if during the daytime, many people they prefer to walk rather than bike, and that kind of bikeability line will be somehow empty, and people will prefer to walk on that line. And that's quite common in some daily life in Korea. Even though it's designed for bikeability, but lots of people they will walk on it. And
no.
So in that ways, I think if we want to discuss about the fairness and equality, we really need to discuss under what kind of usable situation. For example, if that road is 50% used, or we found that there are 80% of users they are normal pedestrian rather than
Thank you.
cyclists.
Yeah. That's a very smart point as well. But there's a couple of things to this. And this is a residential area near a major university. Do you think the people that live there don't deserve better footpaths? And there is a lot of elderly people, just to clarify. So I think that's also one of the questions, that this is where people live and they will do short trips, right? The other thing that we need to consider is design also signal people what is important, right? People, of course, if they see roads that are not comfortable to walk, they will never walk as well. If there is no bicycle lines, they will never consider even the possibility that a bicycle is allowed. So often design can signal people what we need. Can I ask you a follow-up question, if it's okay? Do you think it's important to reduce emissions on the road?
Reduce what? I'm sorry.
Emissions?
Yeah, for sure, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Do you think this road call up for that importance? Do you see that the way it's designed, it gives the sense that we need to reduce emissions?
Would you mind repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Do you think that the way this road is designed gives the impression that we need to reduce emissions?
For me, I think it's fine. Yeah.
Does it tell people?
I'm quite neutral about that.
Does it tell people yes, we need to walk more?
Because actually we have we experience and a VR experiment. We found that in common sense, there are lots of green ratios on that, so it makes people feel comfortable to walk on it. But it combined with the bike, so it makes dangerous. So it's a conflict between them.
Yeah, but at the same time, the argument here is in the Netherlands, one of the most cycling intensive countries in the world, people also had this before. in order to become a very sustainable country, they have to cut this to make a space for the cyclists. So that's why my question goes. This is signaling that we're going to dedicate more space of this because we expect this to happen. And yes, you can say the electric vehicles are a thing, but let's keep it real. They pollute equally bad with the tires and everything. So let's not go there. But in terms of space, they're still giving the value of the design is we're giving more value to the cars. Because objectively, they have way more space than any Colombian tourist going to eat lunch, or any other people living in the area. So it gives the impression to do that. And it's important, that's what I study psychology, because as an engineer, you can design beautiful things and meet the standard. This meets the standard, I'm sure it does. Otherwise, we wouldn't allow it. But the standard often signal some values that don't help to achieve the goals. And I think emissions is one of the goals that we can all agree that needs to be reduced, at least pollution in some way. But you have a very interesting point. Like, of course, from a normal perspective, this is standard. So I'm not claiming that it's different, but thanks, Sharp. Any other comment? It's been 3 so far, so you want to say something?
No.
You seem like interested. Anyone else? That's okay, yeah.
Your suggestion is to move the bike lane to one of the car lanes. So we want to replace one of the car lanes to the bike lane and have more space for pedestrians.
My suggestion is when they designed the bicycle lane, they took the space from the pedestrians, the people that are already vulnerable. Why they didn't take it from the cars? The people that we don't want in the road so much. That's all what I want to say, but good way to frame it. Thank you. Next, 5.
There is no cross line from the one side of the road to the other side of the road. So if there might be some conflict between the pedestrian and the vehicles, and then the pedestrian cannot be protected.
Correct, yeah.
So just no cross line for the pedestrian to the one side of the road to other side of the road.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. I mean, safety infrastructure is prioritized by one group or the other. I also think that the barrier is a bit problematic because this is a residential area. This is apartment buildings. People should have the right to free movement on their homes. It also signals that it's dangerous to separate. Instead, this is just keeping people away from each other instead of designing a solution that makes it safer to be able to interact. Any other contribution? Any boy? It's been like most girls. Wow. Mostly students of Professor Chen.
Thank you very much. I really agree with your suggestion that we should get the cyclist away from the cars road, because I like to cycle between for the commuting, and every time when I ride on this pedestrian road, it's very dangerous, and because I'm from China, in China we have some cyclist road just separate from the car road. So I think it's more suitable. But there is another question is that some car will park on this line, so they will use this cyclist route for parking, and also because in China it's more complex. There are too many e-bike, so they use this kind of road, and they use e-bike for the food delivery. So there will be more bicycles on this kind of cyclist road. So I think I agree with your suggestions.
Thank you. And it's good to have the perspective of another, a cyclist as a road users, which, by the way, more people should cycle. If you see the sustainable development goals, they promote more cycling as a strategy. So if they feel uncomfortable, we need to improve that. You want something else?
Yes,
Yeah?
I have like
You count like 7 now, but...
yeah, it's the second time. So I have like a question or like interesting point. Like generally when we design for that, we are like do it for the current situation. And as you mentioned, Professor, like okay, we suggest to like split a line from the vehicles into like cyclists or pedestrians. So do you think like would it be like as we see for a long time, it gonna makes people have like higher preference to transfer their current choice into bikeability or like walkability. For example, like when people under this situation there are lots of space for vehicles, so people feel like it seems like we have more preference to vehicles, but when we have more space to that, so in that way people will gradually think like it's a more suitable places for bikeability, and then we can reach the sustainable goals.
I think it's important to recognize 2 things. Technology seems to have the right to evolve, right? We have gone from having very old cars to newer cars to new things. Policy takes long time in evolving. So that's the first thing that I wanted to highlight. This design, it was good at the time that were proposed, but we need to update it to the needs of the time. We need more sustainability. Also, unsurprisingly, Korea has a very senior and elderly population of people as well. At the time where the population were younger, this was very suitable. Most of the people were cycling motorbikes or cars around. But when you're in a situation where the majority of the people cannot drive anymore because the eyes fail, the autonomous vehicles never came. That's another issue. And I think policymakers are still waiting for the autonomous vehicles to come, but they haven't. So for those situations, you also need to update the design to accommodate for them. The way we design roads were developed in the 70s, 60s. Some of the designs were updated in early 90s. But the world is very different today. The values that we need to work on are very different today. So if the answer to your question is, we do need a way to design things that is future-centric, thinking about the future generations. And also remember, we all are gonna get more old than what we are. It's a very scary thing to think, but it's an investment for everyone's future as well. Just keep that in mind. Okay, any final intervention? Anyone wants to say something else? No?
I think so.
Good. Okay, so I think it's okay to stop torturing them, but thank you for the interventions, very interesting. And I just want you to reflect a little bit about what happened here. A simple picture can become a whole discussion about values, about situations. I'm sure if you apply these principles to all the engineering work that you do, all the modeling, you can do better discussions in your papers, you can do better introductions, you can frame your research as a policy concern. You can also be very critical and reflect about what it is. And I hope today you see that even a simple walk to a restaurant can become a whole research debate and research project. People write papers about this. About are we living in a world that responds to the needs of the future, that is adequate in terms of values. Okay. I just have a final slide that I would like to share. So I decided to call this call When Engineers Meet Ethics. And the reason is because innovation becomes a moral act. Every time we do engineering work, we're also making assumptions. We're telling values people. Every time we decide to build a road that looks like the one that we just discussed, it signals things. It signals that we're expecting more people wanting cars than walking. More people, that the people that are cycling and walking deserve less space than the people that are in a car. This is what it's telling people. visually. This is where it gets the comfort. Somebody mentioned, and thank you for highlighting that beautiful comment. It is definitely less easy, less easy to walk and cycle than driving. That's what you can see that from a picture clearly. So it's what it was designing there. So our work as engineers also have normative and ethical implications. In this case, the way we distribute value among the road users. The challenge is no longer just how well the system performs. And I think this is very important because in the past, of course, there was a lot of interest in efficiency, in being the fastest, in being the most important, moving more people. But also, now that we are better, that we are more efficient, we also should have space for other values. So how to make it safer, how to develop risks that are more appropriate and well distributed among groups. Designing safer, just mobility means engineering not only for efficiency, but for accountability and inclusion. And that's why I personally enjoy, as an engineer, working in ethics, because it gives me new ideas. And it certainly is the stuff that you can see in the journals of policy that people are very interested in. And I hope that this is has been at least a provocative introduction to the topic so you can read more. So thank you, and any final questions about the lecture or anything, feel free to ask me now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So I really appreciate when our research pushes innovation, especially for the safety. But at the same time, coming from my point of view also, some research for innovation also makes it out of reach from developing countries.
No.
So that's why I couldn't comment regarding the picture earlier, because for that, it's already privileged enough from our country. How can we resolve those standards that is good for developed countries but could not translate well for developing countries?
The problem is the word translation. Research in, I also want to highlight that I am from a low middle income country, The problem is you cannot assume that you can take a solution designed in the Netherlands and do it exactly the same in your country. In the case, I can say Colombia, for example. It will not work. Never copy things from one country to the other. That doesn't work. The first thing that you need to do, and what people should be doing, is developing their own solutions, considering the cultural factors, the social factors, and we have a very nice lecture yesterday about travel behavior. It's also context dependent. Because if you don't understand the cultural elements that influence the behavior that you want to change or the system that you want to achieve, you will not be able to develop that solution that works for your context. And there is hundreds of cases where that doesn't work. From architecture to technology development, from policy, it doesn't work. So you are still able to comment on this example because you live here. You have the right to the road, even if you're not Korean. I think that's also very important that our experiences as people that are from other countries and live in other countries are also valuable because all road users have the same value. And there is things about identity, of course, that prevent you. So you can comment on this. But then you cannot expect to translate that solution from one country to the other, or from the big town to the small town, or from the cyber world to the real world. There is many other things to do. For that, you need to engage in a process of working with the community and finding what they expect from the system to do, what are the needs for the people of now and the future, because we are going to be older, as I mentioned, and also what can we do in order to make it happen. Sometimes it's the same technology, different process. Other times is designing something completely new, and that's why people like you are forming into developing research and developing things. I wish, and this is my own preference as an academic and someone that works in journals and like research a lot, I want to see more work from low middle income countries developing solutions. I don't want them to copy the autonomous car design in the US because that's probably terrible. I want them to find their own way to mobilize people and increase safety. Does it make sense? Yeah, good. Any other question? Oh. You have a question? First, you.
Thank you for a nice presentation. And first, I saw your attitude towards the large language model in the decision making. So it seems like we currently have a negative attitude for this kind of, like for making the large language model as the decision makers, especially for the safety issue. And currently, we have already shown like there is a gradual improvement of the vision large language model, which is like we have a new chance to have a better chance to earn more data and have a better chance to understanding the scenario automatically. So my question is, do you think the development of the large language model should be only stop at the data side, and later on the data processing and understanding should be totally done by the humans? Or do you think like we should find some ways to constrain it, to make it develop, to make it possible to become like a real humans to make a decision in the future? Yeah.
I have very little say about the direction of the technology because I don't work for industry, right? I also think that I do have a negative attitude about it, but the reason is because I do research on technology that kills people, so I'm very worried about it. You know? But I also think that technology has a lot of benefits as well. So the thing that I'm advocating here is for responsibility. You know, that if we're going to deploy a technology, that we have understood the risk completely. And the thing is, we still don't understand a lot of the risk of this technology. So that's where I'm very critical on the approach, because it happened before with autonomous vehicles. As you can see, I've seen centers disappear because they went completely on one direction and many people continue dying, you know? So I also think it's important to be very critical of the work we do and still remain open-minded to the possibility that technology will be useful. I'm not saying one thing or the other. Now, it's true, as you highlight, there is issues on the models. You know, issues about data. There is issues about most of the models have been designed in Western countries as well with Western values, and that's also a question that has not been reflected in, at least in transport research and other disciplines has been reflected. So if we are gonna introduce these models into our research and trying to think how to benefit from them, we also need to do some ethical work, you know? I wanted to ask who's working with AI, but the follow-up question that I will probably ask you is, are you reading papers on ethics of AI? Of course not. Yeah. There are. Have you read them? No, with some detail. But of course the majority is not reading that. But there's a lot of issues behind it, you know, about responsibility, accountability. I can start from whatever, but also what I want you is to realize that working in AI is also working in a field that can have a lot of implications for language, for the way we structure the world. So what I want you today is to realize that there is a whole bunch of research, and don't see it as a problem, as like the fun police. I want you to see it more as an opportunity for innovation that is more responsible, you know? Because just by looking at this image, you got many ideas about how to make it better. Just by thinking ethically, to thinking what it means to be just and developing that, you know? You can do the same exercise in your home country and develop something that makes it better for cycling. You can come out with different solutions that work specifically for the context as well. But today was a good example that that's possible, you know? Ethics is not denied to you. You can use it in your research as well, just by looking at this, okay? And yes, I do think the future is going to be on more analysis of that and ensuring that you can certify the models. In Europe, the main concern with language models is to be certified. What it means that? It means that they give consistent good results. But we don't have a methodology to ensure that they will do consistent good results. That certification is the main problem that exists, and that's why they cannot be allowed to be implemented, because they need to demonstrate that they will be good when they need it. Another questions? Nicole, you wanted to ask some?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And my research topic is far from the transportation.
Okay.
My research topic is like threat assessment in the battlefield. I
Oh.
have to rank the enemy's threat, and based on this information, we have to decide to kill or not kill.
Yeah.
Like in my research topic, did I have to consider ethic in my this kind of defense or military
Okay. It's a bit worried that you're not. But yes, there is a whole field on ethics of warfare. I'm not a particularly specialist in that. But I think there is a lot of work. And particularly, I know there is work coming from Australia a lot. I have a good friend of mine. Because the question is, do you think it's ethical that a robot decide to kill you or not?
I mean, in like my defense concept, for like killing the enemy is good for our team. It means I have to kill them. But in the ethic view, we have to quantify some moral thing. But I did not consider any of the moral thing. So I mean, we have to consider. I have to consider in the defense research topic in the moral thing.
Yeah, I mean, the first step to that is I recommend you to read the legislation, and particularly the treaties on what warfare values are, because there is, of course, some ethical precedents to that. So there is, of course, some principles what is considered like a war crime. You can also commit war crimes, and there is a lot of AI applications that are labeled as not allowed to be used in terms of warfare. So I think something important for everyone here is often you guys will work in situations where there are value conflicts, right? So in your case, and I like that because I'm actually professor of safety and security. Security is very little study as a safety science field, but there are many cases where values like security may impact other issues, like safety, or privacy, or freedom. And in the world, there are many values. Safety is one of them. Security is another one. There is efficiency, there is safety, there is freedom. And societies have different ways to rank them. For some societies, safety and security are very important. For others, like in the Netherlands, freedom is very important, above safety and security. So it's important to recognize there are different cultural differences. But most of the time when you are designing systems, you are also making decisions of what value is more important. So I came here and I showed the picture, but I was assuming that sustainability was very important because we know that cyclists and pedestrians are key. But I could have said, perhaps one of my values is that only having a car is important. I don't know what is that, like rich people, I don't know, what do you call them? It will be important, so I will make decisions on that. So it's important as well to reflect about this, what are the values behind it. And security is one of those areas of research where security becomes, we want to be secure above all. But can you do it ethically? There is a lot of research on that, so you probably will find quite a lot. Okay, any other question? Oh, Nicole.
Thank you for the presentation. So I think one thing you mentioned really, I was really astonished is that you mentioned that in European society, they do the things really differently now, and they don't fund the research related to autonomous vehicles anymore, and they are funding other issues, like when we are preparing some grants together.
Yep.
From this point of view, you said that, for example, in the future, like fully automated vehicle may not be possible, but still, like in South Korea or in mainland China, they're funding a lot of topics related to autonomous vehicles. So this is one question. What do you think about it?
Yeah.
The second question is related to some drama I watched from Netflix.
Okay, good. I like that.
So, because I watched that drama, it's also a Korean drama. So one Korean Oriental doctor, he crashed with some people on the road, and then his life fucked up, and there's a lot of story after that. So I was thinking, once you have robot taxi or you have autonomous vehicle in the future, those rich people, because their occupation and their successful life is really important to them. So because of the legal issue, for example, when you take the autonomous vehicle or robot taxi, once it crashes with others, it's, let's say, it's the responsibility of the manufacturer. So I think maybe in the future, do you think the rich people will use robotaxi more, and let's say the poor people, they will drive by themselves, and they can transfer their responsibility to the manufacturer or the other engineers?
Okay, I'm going to start with the last question. I think that's a very good research idea. Because the issue of being liable by a crash, the people that will benefit the most is the rich people, that they will, of course, be able to outsource responsibility. Nobody has done that. I agree with you. That's a very likely scenario where we will be able to kind of offload responsibility and pay for it. But that's a luxury that only rich people can afford. I think that has a lot of implications for everyone. Are we doing research to help rich people to be more comfortable?
That's an ethical issue.
That's an ethical issue, yeah. And the first question, I forgot. That's what I don't like to question. The funding. Yes. Yeah, I think the funding situation is very simple. Autonomous vehicles, as I say, start promising to save the world, and they didn't. And, life's expensive. So they couldn't afford to continue funding that. So there is less grants nowadays about autonomous vehicles. And the reason is industry lied to us. Bluntly. They said that they're cool, they asked a lot of funding to run tests and pilots, and they didn't deliver the promise. At some point, they needed to stop. Because people continue dying on the roads. So I think that was the main reason that now Europe is more focused on looking at the problems that actually are occurring and trying to address them with more safety science approach, which is we're looking at the issues and trying to find the ways that cause them to prevent them. So a lot of research, the one we're applying, is directed to finding those issues and to develop policies around it. Automation and technology is becoming on the side. Now, I want you all to think about this for a second, because technology optimism is also a value. And I know in many places of the world, there is this idea that a robot is going to come and save us. But the reality is we need an engineer to design the robot first to save us. And I think that's also a concern. But that's what I came to give this talk to you, because are you really experiencing optimism? Could you be using your time better? And is it okay to do it?
I think it's related to geographical factors, because in Europe, they are more like small countries, small cities, so it's hard to implement the AV, but let's say in China or in South Korea, they have like wider roads.
I think it's important to also look at, there are other issues in Europe. So Europe, for example, have a problem that there is also population decline. So for them, it's also priority because there is a lot of rural areas in Europe. Particularly Norway, Sweden, they are particularly worried because there is no bus drivers. Also in Europe, nobody wants to be a truck driver anymore. So they still need to move the world in some way. So the main priority is to develop automation for these use cases. So there is still some development, but also Europe, the space is also a problem because they're telling people to have more children. And then you need to make space for more people as well. So we cannot build cars for everyone. So that's another situation. I think it's also a think about the economy. I'm not gonna deny that the automobile industry is quite big in countries like Korea and China. Of course, if they stop promoting the cars, there will be also an impact on the economy. So you need to manage that in a very political way, but additionally, they will have implications for the work. But can we be doing other technology? I think that's a question. But yeah, that's a very interesting transaction there. Raise your hand if you are single. I love to ask that question because I did one research about meeting people. There was this problem in some countries like Australia where people stop seeing each other. And one of the reasons is because in Australia, everyone has a car. So when I did a comparative study in Europe, apparently you can find love more if you use public transport buses. So you can save the population decline of the world by using bicycles and walking around. So that's a lot of advice by a transport researcher. Any other comments? Questions? No? Anyway, you can always email me if you have something. I'm happy to stop here. Thank you.